Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show. Today, bringing you another awesome guest involved in creating a better tomorrow. We're headed back down to the Washington area today on our virtual road trip back to our friends at FDA, and have the honor of being joined today by Vid Desai, who is the Chief Information Officer, Office of Digital Transformation at the United States Food and Drug Administration, where he sets and leads the agency's information technology strategies, as well as the agency's enterprise IT, data management, and cybersecurity initiatives. And his group, Office of Digital Transformation, oversees overall FDA IT spend close to $1 billion, has a staff of around 2,500 employees and contractors. Prior to this role, Mr. Desai served as the FDA's Chief Technology Officer, overseeing the day-to-day technology operations as the leader of the Office of Information Management and Information Technology. Mr. Desai is a seasoned, nationally recognized technology leader, has close to 4 decades of experience in the IT field, at the intersection of IT, healthcare, and the life sciences, and his previous experience working for both large pharmaceutical and medical device companies, as well as clinical research organizations. Prior to joining FDA in 2019, he was the chief information role, held the chief information role at Vyaire Medical, a respiratory medical device company. It was spun out of Becton Dickinson. He was also the CIO of EndoChoice, a GI device and services provider, and Lake Region Medical, which was acquired by Great Bogdafarm Integer, which is a medical device outsourcing manufacturer. And he has numerous other roles with a large CRO and pharmaceutical organizations, including Quintiles. And he spent several years in leadership positions at GSK. Started his career in IT, actually at DEC in the UK. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, first honors from Royal Holloway College, University of London. A lot of really interesting themes to get into today. We're honored to have him with us. Vid Desai, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you, Ira, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one as well. I found it quite interesting. Again, I just read your extensive bio there, but in sort of looking through everything, aside from that little bit of time early on in your career at DEC, you found a home pretty early on in the healthcare domain at this, this really interesting intersection of health and IT that we'll be getting into. Talk a little bit more about yourself, if you would, for a few minutes, and sort of how you found a home in this space. That started all this off.
Thanks, Ira. And it's interesting as I reflect back on my career. It seems like every little thing that I did from very early on was destined to kind of lead me to where I ended up at the FDA. And what I mean by that is, I got started in computing as a hobby when I was in my teens. Quite geeky. I used to build my own computers and started off programming games and that kind of stuff. So in the late 70s, this is when I was in the UK. The UK introduced this legislation that any drugs dispensed by pharmacists required a printed label. Prior to that, everything was written by hand, and if you had a pharmacist that didn't have good handwriting, you were in trouble. So this law was passed, and I had a pharmacist friend approach me. I was into hobby computing and says, surely you guys can do something with computing. And I at that point in time, developed what was my first commercial entity. I developed a program for him to print his labels, his pharmaceutical labels. And one of the things that he introduced me to is that there are these drug interaction tables.
Yep.
So we programmed that in as well. So, if accidentally you prescribe two drugs that contradicted each other, it would flag that. And I was surprised at how well this picked up. So this is something I just did for a friend as a favor. But frankly, a lot of people caught on, word of mouth caught on, and I sold quite a few versions of this. And this is even prior to me going to college. I actually made a little bit of money out of it. So when I went to school to study computer science, I had the best dorm. I could afford little creature comforts like a TV and video games and stuff. So it sort of funded that. But I mentioned that because unbeknownst to me, that was kind of something that eventually became a big part of what I ended up doing in the healthcare IT area. So I studied computer science at Royal Holloway College, which is part of the University of London. And throughout my earlier life, I was a pretty mediocre student. But there was something about computer science that really interested me and engaged me. And when I graduated from Royal Holloway, I came out with a first class degree, and it's the only time in my life that I was top of the class. And other than that, I was sort of in the general bell curve. But it again, there was something about computing and computer science that really interested me, engaged me at a very young age, and started becoming part of my career. And so coming out of college, I joined DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, and the main purpose for that is, I came out of school thinking I was going to write operating systems. That was my ambition. I was going to write and develop operating systems, and so it would be good to work with a computer manufacturer. And DEC in those days was the company to go work for. It's kind of like the Apple of today. And so I joined them at that point in time. And I was actually one of the first graduate engineers that they had recruited. They typically did recruit a lot of students. I think I was the first batch of 8 that they recruited in the UK to join their engineering facility. And so I joined there, and we started working on this product, which was essentially a mainframe or a mini email system. But in those days, companies were pretty much run on email systems. And so it was a big part of how companies basically did IT. It was the most important IT system that most companies had in those days. And this product was used, one of the largest customers we had was DuPont, and they were supported out of the digital Charlotte, North Carolina office. So I used to go back and forth between the UK and Charlotte quite a lot. And a job opened up in Charlotte that kind of interested me. I was young, single, pretty mobile in those days, and digital relocated me from the UK to the US, and that's how I came to North Carolina and Charlotte. In the meantime, my brother had settled in the Raleigh area. Glaxo, in those days it was just Glaxo, was one of the largest customers we had in the Southeast of this product that we were supporting. And so brother had settled in Raleigh, and there was that family push to kind of try and be somewhat closer. And a job came up at Glaxo to be their email administrator, and I applied. I got the job, and that was the beginning of my switch from a technology company to healthcare. That was my first healthcare company, and I stayed with Glaxo for a good 10, 12 years. And really rose very quickly within that organization. It's probably the one area where I learned the most, and I basically transitioned from being an engineer to starting to get into leadership and management and things like that. Glaxo was a great company, and I grew a lot. And then at that point in time, that's probably when you and I crossed over a little bit with the merger with SmithKline Beecham, where you spent a little bit of time. But after the merger, a lot of the power base was switching from Research Triangle Park, North Carolina to Philadelphia. And a lot of executives were leaving the RTP area. And one of the gentlemen that I used to work with decided to move to Quintiles Transnational, which was a clinical research organization. And then he came knocking on the door and said, why don't you come join me? And he had assembled quite a bit of a team that we had at Glaxo. So I joined Quintiles at that point in time. And again, Quintiles went through a very rapid expansion, lots of M&A activities. But when I joined, it was a few thousand employees. And by the time I left about a decade later, it was close to 15, 20,000 employees. So they went through this huge growth spurt, which was really good to kind of be part of. Now, CROs are all about speed, efficiency, and costs. And in many ways, this sort of prepared me in my next stage of my career. So eventually, now Quintiles is known or has merged into IQVIA. And I got a call from another GSK manager that I had worked with who had landed in Boston and was working with medical devices. And so he invited me over, joined his organization, as kind of his deputy. And this was my entrance from the CRO and pharma business over to medical device. And the other thing that also got me started with this job switch was it was my first time that I was in medical device and in the manufacturing space. Very different from the pharmaceutical activity. In pharmaceutical side, we do some manufacturing. We had some manufacturing plants, but device manufacturing is very substantially different. So a whole different world of healthcare to learn and understand. And so I started with them, and then that got me into this private equity culture. At that point in time, the private equity company that I joined or was working was KKR, one of the larger PE companies. And then later on, I joined Apex Partners and went through a number of small and large private equity funded medical device companies. So I spent about 10 years in these PE-backed medical device organizations. And, one of the terms you hear a lot in medical devices is this, or in private equity, is this term synergy. And what synergy normally translates to is you're going to do a lot of cost optimizations, which inevitably, unfortunately, leads to laying off a lot of people. And so after 10 years in private equity, I had done quite well. Private equity is financially very rewarding, but it's soul-sucking work. Yeah. And I was at that point where I think I had made the money that I wanted to make, and I was contemplating retirement. And this is where the wife decided that she wasn't quite ready to have me at home. And so she reached out to a common family friend of ours, Dr. Amy Abernathy. And Amy, at that point in time, had just taken a job at the FDA as the principal deputy commissioner and had inherited the IT organization, and she was also the acting CIO. And so out of the blue, she invites me for coffee, and she makes this pitch about, what, it's all well and good about retirement, but you really need to come do some service for your country, And so she puts this patriotic pitch, which was really hard not to say, but to say no to. And so I said, fine, Amy, I'll come and help you out on the technology side. Maybe I'll do a year or two to help you find somebody else, and then go back to my retirement plan was to buy a boat and go sailing and learn how to sail. So, I'll go do that. But, the whole pitch that she kind of made was, the work that I had done in private equity and optimizing IT teams and organizations was something that she was very interested in, and she was very curious to try and see if we could put some of that to work in the government. Because in the government, there's a lot of opportunity to optimize IT organizations and what we do from an IT perspective. And as odd as it sounds, it really worked well. I was a little skeptical initially, but it worked out well. And also, the scale and the impact of the work we do in government is profoundly larger and more complex than anything I had done in the private sector. At the FDA, we regulate products that add up to 20 cents of every dollar. And that's 1/5 of the consumer economy. So very broad portfolio of products. And it's actually an exciting privilege to be able to wake up every day and have this awesome ability to do something good with an organization that plays such an important role to ensure the safety and efficacy of so many products that we regulate. And these are products that all of us use, all of our loved ones use every single day. So initially, I sort of joined thinking, I'll be here for 1 or 2 years. Here I am 5 years later, and in most organizations, you typically find an executive team that's really good, but the IT team, needs work, or vice versa. You find a good IT team, but the executive team doesn't get along with each other. At the FDA, we are very unique in that we have a great leadership team and we have a great IT team. It's rare to have a good balance of both. And so, like Amy, I'm very passionate about, having spent about almost 40 years in healthcare, there's so much opportunity to do better in healthcare. And I think at the FDA, I found a calling that satisfies that need, and a good way of making a very significant impact. So that's my story. That's how I got here. I've stayed far longer than I had planned to, but it's been the most fulfilling and the best job I've ever had in my career.
Mm-hmm. It's an awesome intro story, and I'm sitting here smiling, and I'm a pharmacist by by undergraduate training, and I probably worked with a lot of that interaction software back in the 1980s that you that you were talking about. I was at the SK side of GSK when we overlapped, and I remember those days where it was I had a computer on my desk, but it wasn't connected to anything, and the only thing that ever happened was the IT guys came up. We're like, don't install any games on these computers, okay? They're meant for other things. But no, that's it's really amazing. And then obviously, some of the things that we're going to be getting into in terms of AI and some of the other topics. That's really great. But I appreciate everything you were just talking about. Yeah. So I mean, in it. To 2019, it comes along and you join FDA, as I mentioned in the bio, initially in this CTO role. And that sort of jives very nicely with, it's two major initiatives that are going on. I think we'll start with one in 2019, which is the Technology Modernization Action Plan, or TMAP. And we'll put a link to this in the bio of the show. But this is a major document that you're involved in creating, looking at, broadly at sort of the use of technology. Talks a little about we got a lot of these very important scientific and biomedical initiatives happening. We got to keep up with all the technologies to make sure they're translated appropriately. And in this document, I found very interesting, there's all sorts of use cases. I guess the folks from the different parts of FDA, there's people from seafood inspections that want certain AI tools, and there's people from the genomics area that want, more security in the cloud. Take us back to 2019 and a little bit of sort of what went into creating the TMAP, and then we'll talk about the DMAP in a little bit.
Yeah, so I joined in 2019 as the Chief Technology Officer, and Amy Abernathy, Dr. Abernathy, was the PDC. She was the acting CIO, and we had this agreement between us that Amy would retain the acting CIO role, because one of the things that was very important to me, and what I had learned as I rose up in the private sector at the CIO level, was it was very important to me to report directly to the highest levels of the organization, because to me that indicated whether IT was taken seriously or understood seriously at the executive level. And so with Amy being PDC, she retained the acting CIO role. I came in to kind of manage the day-to-day working of IT. And in 2019, we really didn't have an IT plan. The IT team was working very hard, but it was focused at dealing with whatever was the crisis of the day. And if you rewind back a few years, even earlier than 2019, within the FDA, we had an environment that was very volatile. We were dealing with 300 high priority incidents annually. That's almost one major high priority incident a day. So we were, the whole team was just wired towards firefighting. There was no time to do any planning or any strategy. So it was just a very reactive team, and the planning muscle had literally eroded away. And so much of the focus that I've given over the last 5 years is to rebuild that planning and strategy muscle. And so when you're lost and you don't know where you're going, you need a map. Uh, and so that's why we published a modernization action plan, the MAPS as we call them. It provided the agency with a bit of a compass of what we should be aiming for, what we should be prioritizing, and some of the things we should be doing. So we started in 2019 with a technology modernization action plan, and when we published that, we were thinking, oh, that's all we need. We just need to get our technology part right. And then, as we started executing on that and learning more, it became very clear to us that, look, technology is great. It comes and goes, and every 3 to 5 years, we have this significant change that happens around us. You can't really look at technology as being strategic. It's constantly changing. So I don't look at technology as being strategic, and I think that insight sort of hit us. And then we asked ourselves, so what exactly is strategic? If technology is not, it comes and goes. And so data is the strategic asset that we manage. And so that's what started over in 21. We published the DMAP when we had that sort of aha moment that it's all, technology is a means to getting and organizing data right. And I think we were onto something really important there, because if you look at what's happening with AI and the importance data plays, it sort of validates what we sort of empirically discovered as we started thinking about technology. And so in 21, we published the DMAP, the Data Modernization Action Plan, and then later on we had a series of other plans, the Enterprise Modernization Action Plan, and that was based on the insight and the thinking that, look, we can modernize technology, we can modernize data, but if the business processes don't modernize, nothing changes. If you have a paper-based process that you've automated, you can keep throwing technology at it, but it's still going to be just a paper-based process feel to it. It's just going to move from one place to another. If you really want to transform things, you got to completely rethink that business process. So start with the process modernization and then apply technology, and you'll get good data coming out of it. So that was the genesis behind the Enterprise Modernization Action Plan. And then cybersecurity plays a very important role in everything that we do. So that's where the CMAP came in. And there's a lot of things changing that we can talk about later on the cybersecurity side. Fundamental, huge shifts happening there. And then around that whole thing, my thinking about joining the FDA was always for the short term. And so both Amy and I used to talk a lot about, how do we make the changes that we make in IT stick, once there are leadership changes. So we started giving a lot of thought to how can we create a pipeline of leadership that'll continue progressing and taking to a higher level what we've started here. And that was why we published in 2022 the LMAP, the Leadership Modernization Action Plan, which is, how to create a pipeline of good leaders and leadership so that this work continues. We have administration changes that go through. We have, we'll eventually, I'll retire and then others will come in. But how do we make those transitions easier so that we don't reinvent and start from scratch every time there's a significant change? And then in 2023, we brought all that stuff together into the IT strategy that we published that has 6 key goals and the IT operating plan, which essentially is the plan in terms of here are the specific actions we will take to make the strategy come real and how we will track that. There are metrics we talk about and things like that. So those are some of the things that the documents we've created and why we created them. But some of the strategic shifts we're driving through all of this are, things that I mentioned like things like the, modernize the business process before modernizing IT. That's the sort of the EMAP theme. Data is king. It's the strategic asset, which is the main point of the DMAP. And then planning, prioritization, strategy, transparency, engagement of key stakeholders is all very key to success. And that's the TMAP, the CMAP, and the LMAP components sort of tying into that. So that's sort of was the thinking behind the maps, the stuff that gave us a compass and direction. And then later on kind of brought it all together with the strategy where we got a lot of external input as well.
Excellent. And I'll come back to the DMOP in a minute because I want to talk about obviously the things that happened when COVID came along and sort of the virtualization of the organization, which I guess you weren't expecting a lot of that. But before we go there, though, introduce us a bit to the Office of Digital Transformation because this is your new role. As mentioned, this is a major part of the spend and the employees, and it maybe basically sort of the umbrella organization to the Office of Information Management and Technology, Office of Data Analytics and Research, Office of Information Security, and it seems like basically every pharma, biotech, medical device company, veterinary company, vet food company, ultimately, and all the tributaries that lead from that, as well as consumers interfacing, the physicians interfacing, all of this is flowing through what ODT does. Explain this organization now, because this is where you sit now and oversee. Talk about ODT for a few minutes as well.
Sure. Thank you. My audio glitched a little bit in between, so I think I generally heard the sense of the question you're asking. So ODT was formed in 2021, and this is where we elevated it to have a seat at that executive table. I mentioned I got hired as a chief technology officer to assist Amy to kind of manage the IT organization. When Amy decided to leave, the role would have reverted back to kind of us being somewhere in the office of operation, and it was very important to me to have that seat at the table. And so when I was asked to take on the CIO role, I basically said that if I would only continue if we did this restructuring where the IT organization permanently reported to the commissioner. And we had very broad agreement and support from the rest of the leadership team there. So we went through that restructuring. And in 2021 is where we got over the IT, got a seat at the executive table. So the CIO is now a part of the executive committee. And overall, it was based on the recognition that we were spending about $1 billion in IT on an annual basis. And pretty much nothing in the agency happens without technology and data. It's at the center. Data in particular is at the center of everything that we do. And you mentioned we have roughly 600 FTEs through contractors and others. We have over 2,500 heads. We manage over 400,000 endpoint devices, 20 petabytes of data. And just to give viewers an idea of what 20 petabytes looks like, you can literally take, I think there's about 800 linear miles of bookshelves in the Library of Congress. You can digitize all of that, and you can comfortably store all of that in less than 20 petabytes of data. So it's a lot of data. And so our focus area, ever since I joined, has been how do we put that data to use internally and externally? So we formed this new organization, new team at the enterprise level called ODAR, the Office of Digital Analysis and Research. And ODAR was our enterprise focus on data. And we have one simple tagline. Its mission is to put data to use. And we hired our first CDO at that point in time. And a big part of our focus is how do we make all that fragmented, siloed data that we have, and how do we clean that up and make it usable? Right now, because of the siloed federated legacy that we come with, it's very challenging for us. So that's a key area that we're very focused at resolving. The other part, and this also the data part also ties into some of our enterprise business capabilities. So, for example, inspections. Every center does inspections. It's a big part of how we ensure that products we regulate are safe. Lots of variations in how we do different types of inspections, the technologies that we use, and the data sets that we create. And right now, we've got a huge focus at modernizing the business processes so that we can consolidate and simplify the technology, as well as just make inspections a lot more efficient and easier to do than what we've traditionally been able to do. We also look across our areas, and one of the things that we've looked at is, we've got a very specific focus on ensuring that the products we regulate are safe and effective.
Mhm.
But when we looked at the cost of where IT dollars are going, our overhead functions like finance, HR, procurement, how we do the FOIA activities, which we're required to do, the IT systems and the IT costs of doing that, we were spending more money in those administrative functions than we were on the mission functions. And that just felt wrong to us. Our mission is the safety and efficacy of the products we regulate. That's where we should be spending more money. But all these other environments had gotten so complex to maintain that we're spending a lot more money there. And so a big part of our focus right now is looking at those systems and activities in those areas and optimizing them. And this is where a lot of my background in private equity optimization and stuff comes in. How can we make those areas so much more efficient so that we can divert some of the dollars that we're spending there towards our mission-focused areas, safety, surveillance, inspections, and those types of activities. So there's a lot of activity that we've got underway looking at that. And then we're looking at enterprise capabilities like, we have this submissions gateway where all the new drug applications, the 510(k) applications, they come in. All of these have very trade secret sensitive information that's submitted to us. So security is very important to us. We had an environment where we had multiple variants of these things. We're consolidating all those and also making the user interactions between us and the sponsor environments much easier to do. So instead of, as you know, in the industry, there's a lot of consolidation going on. A lot of drugs now get delivered through devices as well. So there's applications to be made both on the drug side as well as the medical device side. Now, if the experience of how you interact with the device side is very different from the drug side, well, that sort of just creates problems. And I saw this as I worked through the pharmaceutical side of the world and the medical device side of the world. It's important that we make it much easier for our sponsors to interact with us in a much more consistent and simple manner. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the reasons why we're focusing a lot on our external portal activities to just unify that and present a single FDA type of a focus towards that. So submissions of portals, increasingly a lot of very complex information gets submitted to us. And in days past when we were primarily relying on chemistry, you could submit a whole bunch of documents and reviewers would be able to deal with that. But now you've got very complex genetic data sets being submitted. Many of these are going to require some degree of collaboration between us and the submitters just to understand the complexity. So there's going to need to be a lot more collaboration between us and the external world. So we're very focused at thinking about how do we make those things easy, simple to do. So those are some of the areas, and data obviously plays a role. So governance is a big area of our focus. We want to reduce the silos, the fragmentation, increase the reuse, reduce duplication, save some dollars, but focus on that experience that we give to our customer base to be much more united, consistent than we've been able to do in days past.
It's interesting that in the DMAP, in the section on infrastructure and operations modernization, you talk about sort of 2020 and everything that happened in terms of the shift towards this virtual teleworking mode. And obviously, here's FDA, 25,000 some odd employees and contractors. I think the number is like 2,400 different applications and databases, something like 500,000 virtual meetings. Yeah. Can you say a few words about what things were like at that period of time and what sort of went into, on top of everything that ODT had to think about, the virtualization of the 2020, 2021 timeframe?
Yeah. So we were very lucky in that, again, starting from 2019, I talked about our focus on data. The other theme that we focused a lot on was collaboration, internally as well as externally. It's a big part of our thinking. We want to make it much easier to collaborate internally and externally. So we had started investing a lot on a set of technology products where pretty much, the phrase I still frequently use is on the collaboration front. If we do the job right, we have the awesome power of leveraging over 25,000 brains together. But if we have the technology to leverage that, then it doesn't matter where these people are, where they work. It's a significant power that we can leverage when we need. So we were already starting to lay the groundwork for that. And so when COVID happened and we all had to kind of start working from home, the fundamentals were already in place. We could easily provide soft phones to people so they could take their phone calls from home. We already had a VPN capacity, and the FDA has always had a good culture where a lot of people frequently worked from home anyway. So the infrastructure was largely there. We had to scale it up a little bit because whilst on a normal week we would see a significant number of people being able to work remotely, we had to take a few steps to ensure that everybody could work remotely. But the fundamentals were there, and in our case, we were fortunate that we did not have to implement new networks or new network technology. It was a matter of us just turning the bandwidth off. So it was, we had the technology in place where we just needed to scale it up. The COVID funding and the one-time funds that came with COVID really helped make that easier, because in government, a lot of the times I find that we have good technology, but we have some funding constraints. And I think the fact that the COVID incident brought with it a good amount of funds made dealing with that very sudden shift much easier for us. But all that modernization work, the TMAP work that we had started in 2019 really helped. If we hadn't started that, I think we would have been caught flat-footed, and I think the rest of the country would have been very unhappy with us. So we found ourselves in a bit of a fortunate place, having started in 2019, not knowing that 21, 22 we're going to be as awful as they turn. Oh, sorry, 2019, 2020 were as awful as they turned out to be. But I think that groundwork did help us in that. The collaboration technologies really helped allow us to work, and frankly that we're all in this new way of working now, and it's working really well. I mean, I think across the board, I can certainly speak for IT. We've seen year after year our productivity just keep getting better, and the ability to be able to hire really good skills, regardless of where they are in the U.S., is a great benefit. It's a challenging environment for us to hire good talent, but having the flexibility of being able to hire from anywhere really gives us a little bit of an advantage.
In last year, together with Commissioner Califf, you publish a report, Driving Data and Technology Modernization, Business Transformation, talking about, it's a third year anniversary of TMAP, and you talk about sort of the continued strategy to enhance both, as you were mentioning, internal and external users' digital experiences. And you talk about some interesting cases here. I think a lot of time we too often think of FDA just about sort of human drugs, but you point out some important wins in this document. One with the Center for Veterinary Medicine and their sort of electronic submission gateway, the Human Foods Program. We sometimes forget about the F in FDA, but sort of that whole other area that you make sure is safe, effective, and not misbranded for our health. Talk about some of these. We don't have to specifically talk about these two. I found them personally quite interesting, but if there are specific cases that you might want to mention in terms of where the digital experience was really optimized that you're quite proud of, and thinking about, next steps for 2024 and 2025.
Yeah, so I think there's two areas of work that we do at the enterprise level. So part of our job is to ensure that the IT infrastructure is rock solid, that allows everybody to do what they need to do. So we want to make sure that the laptops are working, our networking is working, our email systems are up and operational, and all that good stuff. So the infrastructure part of it is one. But the other part, which is also very much been in the focus in the last 5 years or so, are the enterprise applications and the enterprise data. There's a set of data that we should just be able to have a very easy way of getting to. So I'll give you an example. During COVID, we were asked by Congress to we had to stop in-person inspections because of the pandemic. And so we were asked the question of, okay, so what's the backlog of inspections that's built up across the agency? It took us over 6 months to kind of piece that data together. As simple as it sounds, how many inspections, but because the food, the drugs, the veterinary side, all were using different systems, different ways of measuring, different ways of tracking all this information, and to accurately put all that information together at the enterprise level was a huge challenge, and that's why we started this enterprise data management program, part of our data team, to basically just say, what can we do to make collecting that level of enterprise information easy. The FDA works very well as a collection of different centers, but we historically have not thought about or focused a lot about working as a singular entity, an enterprise. In a large multinational, you typically have executive dashboards that the CEO or the C-level folks can quickly get to. How much products do I have? What's my supply chain backlog? How many orders do I still have? Some basic information you should be able to get at the tips of your fingertip. You just need that to run your organization. That kind of information and data is hard to get at the FDA collectively at the enterprise level. And so that's the focus of our enterprise data area. No singular standard for what we define as a firm, for example, and how we collect that information about a firm. So the drug folks had a different way of collecting and managing the firms that they would inspect or work with. The veterinary side has a completely different way. The tobacco side has a different way. So it was all over the place, and now we're increasingly thinking about how do we do it in with some data standards, so that when we have to pull this stuff together, we can do so much faster and easier than we've been able to do in the past. So that's one of the areas that we're working on. So for example, if we're doing inspections, we're sending an inspector or a set of inspectors to a particular area somewhere in the world. What other inspections could we perhaps do while we've got that team out there at the same time? How can we optimize those types of decisions based on data? And that's kind of the types of problems we're trying to solve with the modernized inspections work that we're doing right now. How do we collect data? How do we ensure all the pre-planning information, the actual inspections data, and the post inspections work that we do is all thought through in a smart, intelligent way, so that we can really do that work very smartly. And so that inspections area is a huge area of focus, and again, the data collection and how we use data is a big part of our EMDM activity. Mm-hmm. The other areas that we're sort of involved with a lot, again, with the data focus is, given that we regulate so many products, I mentioned the 20 cents to the dollar from a consumer economy, there's always some event happening that disrupts that supply chain. Mm-hmm. We dealt with that with the infant formula shortages that we dealt with about a year, 18 months ago, when we had that issue. Analgesics shortages were something that came in the middle, and right now, in near real time, the threat of the Canadian rail strikes can disrupt the supply chain of many of the products that we regulate. And so there's an expectation that we proactively start managing events and issues like that. We've got a part of our data team works on how can we use data to very quickly, easily solve those types of problems. In the past, the way we would work is, an event would happen, we would get shocked, the world would get shocked. We would then go out and look for a contract to give to a vendor to come help us manage that from a data perspective. And that we would take months and months before we could ramp up and be able to address those things. Now we have a team, and we're trying to create an internal team that can jump on that from minute one and be able to deal with that. So our response times need to be much faster. And so not only are we looking at the process side of things, the people side of things, but also on the data side, how can we be much better prepared? Because these events, given the broad portfolio of products that we deal with and the volatile world we live in, are going to continue happening. And we have to deal with that almost on a daily basis. So that's another area of focus for us. And then I talk a little bit about the administrative functions. They generally work well, but there's a huge opportunity to optimize that. We spend too much time and too much dollars and too much effort on the administrative side that we would like to shift some of that towards our mission side.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some areas that we have a lot of passion for. Again, we're limited a little bit by what we're funded to do and not, but those are at least the areas that we're trying to prioritize, and we're getting some good traction. We're starting to have some very good discussions with our friends in Congress, and I think they're starting to see the reason why these things are important to invest in.
Absolutely. And that segues very nicely into where I want to go next, and that's into the CMAP, or the Cybersecurity Modernization Action Plan. And it's interesting because about a year ago, I hosted John Sherman on the show from the Pentagon, who just retired as their CIO, and he introduced us to this principle of zero trust and cybersecurity, and making sure only the right people have access to the right systems at the right time. As you were mentioning, this is it's not just a sort of economic security, and that you do oversee regulation of 20% of the economy, but also just health security. That we want to make sure our drugs and our foods and our agri products are safe. Say a few words. Reintroduce us to the theme of zero trust, how you're using it at FDA. And I looked at some of the things, sort of some of the priorities in the CMAP, things like, leveraging AI and machine learning as part of cyber detection. You have this interesting counterintelligence initiative, all these things, I think, the Defense Department, CIA, whatever, but clearly, you're implementing these for the importance of the FDA and what it does. Take us a little into this realm, if you would.
So I'm very fortunate at the FDA. In 40 years, I've worked with many cybersecurity organizations and CISOs, and I'm proud to say that in 40 plus years of a career, the CISO and the cybersecurity organization we have in the FDA is the best I have ever seen. Craig Taylor, who's our CISO, he's the best of the best. And on the zero trust part, the reason that's so important to us. Again, we talked about the breadth of products we regulate. The information that they submit to us is market changing. This is the kind of information that somebody interested in insider trading would love to get their hands on, because frankly, we could be making a decision on something that's potentially a blockbuster drug or device or something like that. So nation states are constantly looking to steal some of that trade secret information from sources. So we see a lot of those activities, and that's why security is very important to us. And there's two things happening in the cybersecurity world which I think are hugely important. One that we've talked about, zero trust, I think is becoming understood. In the days where we had on-prem systems and everything was within our perimeter, it was we could build that castle and moat type of an architecture and keep the stuff that was inside secure. But with the cloud, we really needed a completely new environment. And that's part of what zero trust does. But the other thing that zero trust does, which people don't talk about a lot, but I think is probably even more important, is um, the issue of lateral movement. Um, once somebody gets in, it's very easy in a non-zero trust environment to move laterally and hide yourself. And one of the things that zero trust does is it makes that much harder to do. And I think that part of zero trust is extremely important because small and large things happen. Um, but once they happen, if it's easy to move laterally, they become much bigger. Uh, and that's where the zero trust architecture is very important. But the problem with zero trust is it's a completely new architecture. So all the old stuff we had, all the old architecture we had to replace that and build this whole new environment. So not only is it complex, but it's extremely expensive. So it has a very significant cost implication. So that's one area of very significant change that's happening, and the nefarious characters are out there. It's a cat and mouse game, and they're getting smarter and more complicated and stuff all the time. The other activity that's only now getting talked about, which also is security related, but I think is going to be a huge change, is around quantum computing. So around quantum, the latest research shows that by 2026, 2027, nation states will have the ability to break existing encryption algorithms. And pretty much the prediction is that by 2029, pretty much you, me, and everybody else will be able to break encryption, the current encryption technologies that we have. Now, the reason that's important is encryption is used in everything, from your USB sticks to hard drives, your network routers, switches, your server disks, Wi-Fi. It's at all parts of the IT infrastructure. And NIST has just recently introduced 3 new algorithms for what they call the post-quantum computing era. So these are new algorithms encryption algorithms to withstand the quantum computing era. Now, this is very significant because now all the hardware and software manufacturers will start embedding these new algorithms in there. But what that means is pretty much every layer of your technology, your USB sticks, your Wi-Fi, your servers, your hard disk, all areas where we use encryption is going to need to be updated. And so again, hugely expensive, huge amount of work from an IT perspective, and people are just starting to think about the impact of that. But the good news in all of this is IT. We've for the last few decades we've gotten used to kind of changing everything every 5 years or so anyway. But this is the new change. The change driven by zero trust is one. I think we're sort of in the middle of that right now, and just about the time when we catch up with that, this quantum computing wave is going to start coming, and that's going to be the next one. So our work in cybersecurity just evolves, but it's I just wanted to kind of convey the significance of quantum computing. People have been talking about that, but it's about to start getting real.
It's quite intriguing, it's sort of being on the frontier of quantum computing now, and you're already talking about the post-quantum era and defense requirements against it. Wow, I mean that's intriguing, but I wish I take my hat off to you on that one because it's well, everything Hollywood tells us about quantum computing is that's going to be a game changer. But no, that's really awesome. But it gets me thinking about one other thing that I profiled on previous shows a couple of your colleagues, including Dr. Bumpus and Dr. Bugan in the Office of New Drugs. And, as we're talking about the theme of innovation on those shows, we come to the realization that, not everything that comes out of the Food and Drug Administration at the end of the day is going to be sort of an old school chemical or even a biological anymore. We have digital health products. We have these AI algorithms. We have our old shop, set up an electroceuticals division, which has, it's about an electric shock, not the pill itself and causing the effect. There's this, what do you call it? Health IT, tech bio, whatever you want to call it. What is the future in terms of your organization's responsibility for joining in on a lot of these meetings when the actual product isn't a biologic product anymore, but an information-based health or a drug product?
it's there's a lot of discussion and dialogue happening within the agency. So we think of AI in two different sectors. So there's obviously the regulatory side of AI, and our CDRH colleagues do a great job of thinking about the impact. I mean, we already regulate software as a medical device, and already I think we've got upwards of 700 medical devices that have some form of AI activity that have been approved. Maybe on the radiology side has seen a lot of activity there. So definitely they're already doing some of that, and I think there's a lot of work going on. We recently published a paper at the agency level in how the medical product teams, CDRH, CEDAR, and CBER are collaborating together to kind of start thinking about the types of issues that I think you're raising and what that means for us. So I think some of those discussions are actively happening within the agency, and I'm really pleased to see us taking a very proactive stance at that. Our role at the enterprise IT level is to work with those teams to understand how that impact is going to affect our infrastructure. So, for example, one of the things that we are actively thinking about is, there's a lot of different forms of AI. And these AI models are complex, expensive, and they take a lot of computing power to run. So when somebody submits a submission that has an AI model that we need to check and run through, and one of the things I want to point out here is, unlike other regulatory authorities around the world, at the FDA, we like to verify everything that's submitted to us independently. So we no longer just look at the data that's been submitted to us. We like to do our own validation, which means many of the algorithms and AI technologies that people are basing their submissions on, we will have to run them and validate them ourselves. So we are already starting to think about, well, what does that mean in terms of the kind of computing infrastructure we will need to have to be able to do that? And how do we do that in a cost-effective manner? How do we even pay for that? Because these things are not only complex, but they cost a lot. So we've got an AI governance board that's set up to start ensuring that the current immediate use of AI takes safety into consideration. We want to make sure that it's we don't violate any safety affecting or rights affecting issues that may be caused by AI. So we have a team thinking through that. We have another team, and we've got a few individuals we're going to be bringing in from the outside to help us have discussions internally, but also talk to and research on the external sponsor side to see what they're doing and what types of things we would be expecting the next 4 or 5 years, so that we are ready with the infrastructure to be able to support that type of submission. So a lot of thought process is going on, a lot of organization work is going on, and I think we'll have a lot more to say about this in the next 12 months. Like I said, we've got a couple of individuals coming in to help us lead that activity, and I'm excited about it. To be honest, I think if you look at the cloud infrastructure, all the base work that we've done, it has taken us in the right place to be able to deal with this. So, once it's a huge change, it's not something that keeps me up at night. I think the one thing, again, I mentioned, we're very fortunate to have a very good team at the FDA. We have a lot of very bright people thinking about this. And I am determined to make sure that we're proactive about this. We don't want to be holding any innovation behind. We don't want to be the bottleneck in any of this activity, because AI is certainly gonna. It's a little bit like Moore's law. The acceleration rate is just going to continue increasing, and I think AI is just going to take it to a whole new level.
Thing I wanted just to ask about, because you mentioned, in the CMAP, and going back to sort of the work on cybersecurity front, the principle that FDA, like many other organizations or government, is this mission first, people always organization, and clearly, along with the pharmacologist and the toxicologist and pharmacokineticist, you got to build up the future capabilities of the, everything that goes into your organization, as well as the cybersecurity workforce. Say a few words about the importance of what's happening in terms of prioritizing the right workforce for this initiative in FDA.
I think AI does something very interesting. Up until now, IT has helped with the productivity side of things. It's automated a lot of things, and it's made things more efficient. In fact, I would argue that the last 5 decades or so of economic growth has largely been fueled by IT, kind of improving the productivity of pretty much everything. It's been the technology revolution. And I think the one thing that IT has not been able to do is innovate. You know, we were trying to do this, when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, we were trying to figure out, how can we use IT to innovate on the drug research side and the CRO side. We're looking at how can we improve patient recruitment, improve the clinical trials, data collection, and that kind of stuff. Again, we could automate, we could speed up the cycle times a little bit, but IT was not able to innovate. And I think with AI, we are now at the cusp of something where technology could be an innovator. It may allow us to make breakthroughs and discoveries that everybody has dreamt about technology doing that, but it hasn't happened to date. But I think AI is the first technology that I have seen that I'm hopeful will help us make breakthroughs on the innovation side.
Awesome. Vid, any final messages while we have you today? I really appreciate the time you spent, talking about the organization, what's going on in your shop. Any other things happening for the remainder of 2024 as we get close to 2025, conferences, talks you're going to be giving, anything else that I missed while we have you today, please?
So we've got a lot going on. So we've got a IT symposium coming up end of this year. We do an annual symposium. This will be our third annual symposium, where we'll be sharing a lot of, it's the place where we share with pride some of the cool work that happens across the centers from a technology perspective. We also use that to share some of the areas that are priority areas or problems that we're trying to solve that we want to try and get the vendors to engage in. So that symposium is a good flagship event. And this year we're actually consolidating our scientific computing symposium that we used to do separately together with so there's one symposium going forward. I mentioned a little bit about the AI and some of the planning we're doing there, and we'll have more to say about that next year. But on the technology side, you can continue to see us refresh the IT strategy and the operating plan on an annual basis. So we're working on some of that areas as well. There's a lot happening, but I think in particular, I'm looking forward sometime next year to share a lot more on the AI side. I know a lot of people are very curious to hear and see details. But we not only will we be engaging all of you to provide us with some thought leadership and ideas of what the sponsor community is doing, but we want to factor that into our thinking and share at least how we're thinking about what we should be doing internally to plan for AI going forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to that. Hopefully we can do a follow-up episode, but really, really great stuff. Very, very interesting story, Vid, and I look forward to continue to follow you and your team and wishing you the best with all of these initiatives. Again, for everybody that is going to be listening to this episode across the various podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, again, you've been spending time with Vid Desai, Chief Information Officer, Office of Digital Transformation at the Food and Drug Administration. Vid, I want to again thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us, come educate us for a little while on what you're up to. Obviously, thank you for everything you do to keep our food and our drug supply safe and running efficiently. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow through the developments of these tools and technologies. Really an awesome story, and it was great having you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ira. Thanks very much. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Definitely.